to, if that's the case with us tonight. I'm happy to take it to 90 minutes if that is something that people want. So don't feel constrained.
great. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yep.
Thank you.
We had actually kind of had a conversation and hoped you would say that, and you have. So thank you for
You know me too
We're
well now.
muted.
Thank you so much.
More than welcome.
Who's there?
so while
I
we're just
I
kind of
have to say you're very humble, because I know you're brilliant. Despite having editors make you look even more brilliant, you certainly brought your wisdom to that interview.
Oh, that's kind. Thank you, Todd.
Uh,
I can honestly say that I have never received such a huge
Julianne,
response to anything
or-
I've done on PBS
Julianne,
as this
or-
interview. And I think timing is one of the reasons, that people have responded to it so well. We're at a point in our country's history and culture, I think, when people are realizing that the us against them approach simply will tear everybody down. I can tell you that my own work, both with schools and with companies, is just taking off. And it's all been happening over the last few weeks. So something's going on. And
Right.
you're all a part of it.
That's
I was,
wonderful.
there is a question. I think one of the questions is about the new K through 12 program that you're starting, and
Right.
I'm really sure we'll want to hear about that. And I'm really glad it's taking off, because something else needs to take off besides what's been taking
right.
off or not taking off, being imposed on us. So
Right. I think people are hungry for an alternative. And there are very few people right now who are being heard about what the alternative is. So that's something
are
as well.
behaving pretty good tonight.
I think Rick has frozen. Yeah.
Mute is on so that we don't get.
Rick, you're freezing up a little bit. Quite a lot, actually, at the moment.
Yeah.
He does practice Buddhism, and he may be in a transfixed state right now. That comes and goes. And of course, he's been, had a great signal the whole time we've been meeting.
Of
over the
course.
past few
Of
weeks.
course. Never fails to fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rick, you froze up a little bit there, buddy, but you're back now.
Yeah, I was thinking I should have gone to the church today. I have a better coverage there, I think, but I hopefully we'll make it. Fortunately, my role is limited, and it's sort of at the beginning. And so if I freeze up, that won't be a catastrophe. So. So where are you coming from? Irshad, are you in the New York area?
I am. I'm in Brooklyn. That's where I live. Yeah. And that's where I'm joining you all tonight.
Great.
Rick, they're starting to come in pretty fast and furious. And so if you might want to, just wanted to remind people to mute their mics unless you're speaking, so we don't get feedback. I have been muting your mics, but as everyone's coming in very fast, it's hard to do all of those things. Thank you.
Good reminder, Lily.
So we've been having good conversations here, Shah. We have people from, a number of different Unitarian Universalist congregations, both in the West Coast and down in Texas and Georgia and Michigan.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
So people are really finding out about what we're trying to do, and I'll explain.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you will explain more about what exactly that is, yeah?
Yep, in a second. In the introduction, I'm going to kind of frame things for you to give you a better sense of where we're at and why we're so interested in this wonderful book.
Lovely.
It's really, it's been good to reread it, and kind of lots of times I found I missed, real gems that just sort of buried in a little comment so it's a good thing. So I'm
Well,
glad.
rereading will do that for any of us. Some of my favorite books I try to reread at least once a year.
52 people on already.
It's a good. We've been waiting just a few minutes after 6 to get started because people take a while to find their links and everything, but we're getting there.
There we go. Well, there's Irshad, there's Rick, there's Todd, there's Rick in progress. Virginia. Guess I better turn on it.
61 up ready.
Okay, we have Pat. Okay.
Yeah, we are a pet-friendly Zoom. So if you do want to bring your pets into the Zoom meeting, it doesn't bother us. As long as your pet doesn't bother you too much, we'll be okay.
As a truly inclusive space, I'll want to hear from the pets as well, should they have something to say.
Yeah. They could, well, you know about a talkative dog yourself, so.
Yep.
Whenever I see yourself and it says Lily, I think of the Lily that we have here.
While there's a little opportunity, is it possible that you could tell us the reason you decided to do the conversation with your dog, which is delightful?
Oh,
Absolutely. And
that's one of the questions.
that's one of the
it?
questions. So I'll address that then during the conversation. But
Yeah.
yes, there is method to the madness.
Well, as a preacher, I know you gotta have different ways to communicate and get through to people. And I learned that there's a principle called overhearing. Kierkegaard talked a lot about it. It says sometimes the best way to communicate is for people to overhear a conversation rather than being spoken to directly. And so that's a good technique.
Rick, not everybody thinks that the way I wrote the book works. But I will say, as I did at the very beginning, that I did not tell my editor that this was what I was going to do because I didn't want him pushing back right away. It would have made me second guess myself, And so when I sent it to him, I didn't hear back for probably 3 weeks. And I thought, that's it, I'm sunk. And, one April morning, I woke up to a delighted and delightful email from him. And he told me that he, really, really had a hard time thinking that as he was reading it, that I can pull this off. Turns out Lily really did win him over.
Well, it did me. And I think it was a wonderful way to get messages across. So anyway, it looks like we're getting so close. We filled up 4 pages here. It's a great attendance. We're getting a good turnout tonight. We're recording this. Thank you for giving us permission, Irshad, but
Sure.
we will be sharing this. And many of the views on the worship service we did together were viewings of the recording. So people, you're taking off in Unitarian Universalism too, and we're going to promote that. So
Excellent. I'll take all the support I can get.
great. So I think I'm going to go ahead and get started with my introductory comments, and then I'll let, is Craig Morrow here yet? I'll bet he is. He's sitting.
He is. I saw him a minute ago. Maybe he's muted.
I'm here.
There he is. Hey, Brother Craig.
So I'm going to do a little introduction, Craig, and then you'll offer us a chalice lighting, and then Todd will lead us through the questions with Irshad. So first of all, let me just have a few opening comments. First of all, Irshad, it is so great to see you again. We've really deepened our relationship in this past year since you joined us in October. So I'm sort of tempted to say you don't really need an introduction, so we can just get right into it. But you know, many of us have been reading and discussing your book. We're already enriched by knowing a lot of, or some of your background as a South Asian refugee from Idi Amin ruled Uganda, who grew up in Canada and rocked the boat too much, and your madrasa, your religious school. And by the way, many Unitarian Universalists got into trouble in their Sunday schools for asking too many questions. So you're in good company in that regard. And you have continued your pattern of intellectual inquisitiveness into your adult life. And you've learned a lot along the way that has gained you wisdom in the arts and practices of moral courage. And now you generously serve us all by offering opportunities to explore this path when there's alternatives to our polarized ways are sorely needed, as you mentioned earlier. So I'm really grateful. We're all grateful for your compassionate, courageous service to us all here and around the country and the world. So I just want to quickly set the stage a little bit and then turn it over to Craig. Irshad, we could really use some wise counsel on how we can walk the path of moral courage as Unitarian Universalists. I have learned over the years that it's good and necessary, if not daunting, to proclaim pachyderm presence. That's my way of saying name the elephant in the room. And in the case, let me note here that Unitarian Universalists are struggling. Many, maybe not everyone, but most of us who are gathered here fear that an illiberal, intolerant faction has largely seized the leadership of our association, and most of the laity are not aware. And when they do become aware, many are as alarmed as we are. Some of us lay and clergy are now beginning to challenge this. And I mention this because now you'll understand why we felt so motivated to study diversity without division, because we're looking for alternatives to the spiritually toxic critical race theory ideology that's being imposed upon us. And we'd appreciate any insights you might have as we face that challenge. Next, looking and turning in the opposite direction, let me mention that most of us are liberals and progressives. Like you say, we sometimes have to use labels. And we don't really have the best track record in regards to engaging with conservatives, especially social conservatives. And so I think many of us are humbly realizing that we're being called to find a better way, and we'll appreciate your thoughts on how we can walk this path. So I think I've said enough to get us started, sort of set the stage. And I would like to begin with a special chalice lighting for my dear good friend and colleague of many decades, at least a few decades, Reverend Craig Morrow of the Y East congregation here in Portland, Oregon. So Craig, would you light the chalice, and then we can go to Todd.
Thank you very much, Rick. Thanks so much. Irshad, thank you so much for coming to be with us this evening. Appreciate it so much. Rick invited me because he knows that I've been for many years pushing for a slight change in the Unitarian Universalist statement of principles and sources and purposes. We have a source that says one of the living tradition we share draws from many sources, including Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. Well, I've got a nuclear family here of three, me, my wife, Pamela, and my son, Saad. And I would find it very strange if I got an invitation that said, Saad and Pamela, we're inviting the family, and we look forward to seeing you, Saad and Pamela. Wait, there's a third member here. Thank you very much. I wouldn't mind being invited to the table. And of course, the third member of that family of Abrahamic religions is Islam, which people have had so much difficulty in understanding and coming to terms with. But the best way to get to know anybody is to come to the table with them. Come to the table, invite people to the table. Irshad, thank you so much for how much guidance, and I know that guidance is part of your very name, how much guidance you have given us on how to invite people to the table and how to behave ourselves once we're there. So I light this chalice in the spirit of a big round table.
That's beautiful, Craig. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Craig. Thank you to everyone for being here. We have a very large crowd tonight. I'm glad some folks who haven't been able to attend the book study have been able to come tonight. So welcome to one and all. Thank you so much for what has been a very enlightening 6 weeks. And we're so happy to be able to top it off with what we've been anticipating since the beginning. And that is your presence with us, Irshad Manji. Thank you so much for being here. It's a great privilege. There's a lot of questions that we're going to be asking, and these are a few questions that have been refined from those who have been part of this study for the past 6 weeks. So I want to start, however, with a question of my own, and this is really based on something you said prior to the official start of the meeting, because I kind of want to accentuate the positive. I have been framing this period that we're in as a new endarkenment, because it is a rejection of my religious values and history, which is based upon reason, freedom, and tolerance. And so which came out of the Enlightenment. So I see it as really a rejection of the Enlightenment. And I'm also hopeful that it's going to be a short-lived endarkenment. It won't be like the 800-year dark ages that preceded the Enlightenment. I'm not always so sure, because I get kind of down in the dumps as I see some of the negative news. But I do ultimately hope it's going to be short-lived. You have reason to maybe think that that's true. And I was hoping you might share a little bit more and expound upon your insight that you spoke of prior to the formal start of our meeting.
Sure thing. Well, first of all, good evening, everybody. And again, thank you for the invitation. Please know, in the spirit of Don't Label Me itself, dissent, disagreement with both me and Lily, but especially with Lily, are more than welcome this evening. And if there is any dissent with me, just know that not only do I welcome it, I know I'm going to grow from it. So let that be, an invitation for all of us to use our precious and limited time together to grow. Todd, you asked about hope and concrete signs of progress. And I will tell you all that I think, for reasons that have more to do with exhaustion than anything else, I'm finding that more and more Americans are wanting, craving, and looking for an alternative to the either or, us against them narrative that has taken hold in this country over the last several years. I say this because I can't believe, to be blunt, my good fortune in coming out with a school program, a no-shaming alternative to mainstream anti-racism programs in K-12 schools. I can't believe the good fortune I have to be able to have come out with this only 2 weeks ago, after 5 years of working on one piece of it and 15 years of researching and writing about and engaging about what you will learn tonight I call the moral courage method. My point is that, if I had come out with this work 5 years ago, which was absolutely my intention, I don't think the country would have been ready for it. Today, far more of the country than even the first conversation I had with you all last year. Today, far more of the country is ready to hear and pick up on the alternative. And I know this, again, not just for the education sphere. I can't go into further detail than what I'm going to say now, but in September, there will be another big announcement that will show you just how much more of the country is ready to take up moral courage. And I think next year as well, in the media world, there's going to be another big development here. So just know that if you are ready to throw in the towel, don't. It's too soon. It's never too late for an ever perfecting union to continue to perfect itself, and it's too soon to decide that it won't.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that meaningful hope. So some other formal questions, but I think it might be nice right here at the start, since you mentioned the moral courage method, especially for those who may not have been able to join us for the book study,
Yeah.
To give us a brief synopsis of what exactly it is you're asking us to do, what this is all about.
Right. So let me first define moral courage, maybe even more succinctly than I was able to do in the book. Moral courage quite simply means doing the right thing in the face of your fears. Now, I get that in a polarized time, what is the right thing? After all, one person's right is another person's deplorable. And I'll get to that in just a moment. But let me start with the easier part of this equation, doing the right thing in the face of our fears. So social science research repeatedly shows that what we human beings fear more than anything else is being judged, being blamed, being shamed, being regarded as weak, as evil, or somehow as unworthy, and being considered this by the people whose respect we most crave. That is any group with whom you identify. And that could be your biological family, it could be your spiritual family, it can be your professional family, it can be all three, or it can be something else entirely. But everybody has a tribe whose respect they most covet. And that is why the vast majority of us, the vast majority of the time, will fall into line with our tribe, because we don't want to be outcasts. And the brain that we've been given by evolution really militates against feeling like it's okay to be an outcast. So that is the biggest fear that we human beings have, is the fear of judgment from those whose respect we want. Which is why most of us will not proactively expose ourselves to points of view that challenge the consensus of our group. And because we don't do that, we don't open ourselves up to really asking, well, am I doing the right thing? And even if we have asked ourselves, am I doing the right thing? And we've concluded, you're darn right I'm doing the right thing. I'm standing up to discrimination such as racism. Irshad Manji, I don't need you and I don't need moral courage to tell me that I'm standing up for the right thing. And I would say you're absolutely right about that. The question then becomes, are you doing it in the right way? Meaning the most effective way, the way that will actually move the needle. And this is where so many dogmatists, certainly on the left today, and of course, on the right in their own way, have failed the test of moral courage. They have failed to rein in their egos. And that primitive part of the brain, which gets very defensive whenever we sense threat, even if that threat is not a life or death threat, even if it's not in the least existential. As I said in my PBS interview, if we're merely feeling the stress of being disagreed with, the ego will want to make us believe that we're experiencing, life extinguishing jeopardy. And given the environment in which we're living today, so I'm not just talking about biology anymore, I'm talking about environmental factors. We're all immersed in technologies that are deliberately designed to amp up our emotions. Even legacy media increasingly get their revenue from business models that rely on subscribers, not on mass advertising. And subscribers pay for a very simple reason: to have their biases confirmed. People will hate read and hate watch and hate listen to something if it's free, just because they hate it. But very few people will actually pony up good money to have their biases challenged. And of course, legacy media outlets appreciate this. And therein lies yet another factor in the bubble tightening around us. So we have to make a very intentional effort to bust out of that bubble. And that means reminding our ego, speaking truth to the power of our ego that no, Irshad, you are not going to die because somebody disagrees with what you're saying right now. You're going to be fine. In fact, you might actually grow. But we have to remind ourselves of that. And very few dogmatists on the left, on the right, or places in between will allow themselves to transition from the primitive part of the brain to the more evolved part of the brain, where reason and emotion can coexist, rather than reason being utterly bulldozed by emotion. So the moral courage method teaches people, from grade schoolers to people my age and older, how to tame our egos in service of giving the other a fair hearing. And let me say one last thing about this. Giving the other a fair hearing is not about being nice. It's not even about being civil for the sake of civility. Let's be honest, much harm has been done to humanity under the umbrella of being civil. No. The moral courage method is about making you and me and the other a more effective communicator of our respective positions. The bottom line is this, and this is an ironclad law of human psychology. If you wish to be heard, the most reliable way to be heard is to first give your other a fair hearing. So the moral courage method leads by listening. It's counterintuitive, but from a neurobiological perspective, it is absolutely magical.
Great. Well, thank you so much. That's a great question. I have a big question I want to jump right into, but I think here at the start, it's better to bump another one up. And that's something we've also already touched upon just a little bit. It's written as a two-part question. One, why did you decide to write "Don't Label Me Now"? And why did you decide to use Lily as your rhetorical device? I think that it's two questions.
I think it is two questions.
The first part is really important to dig into, as is the second part. So
let me start with the second, if only to get it out of the way. It's a very easy question to answer. I did not have the intention of writing this as a conversation, number one, let alone a conversation with my dog. But, I'm speaking about issues that are emotional. And I easily could have fallen into a rant, into a polemic. And I didn't want to do that, because it is precisely the point I was trying to make, is that the world has enough dogma, secular and religious. I didn't want to contribute to more of that. So I realized, as I was bonding with Lily, that she has the kind of sassiness and feistiness that if she were going to speak English, she would be pushing back on me a lot. And this is the absolute truth. As I would unload to her my frustrations with humanity, with my species as opposed to hers, every once in a while she'd cock her head, as dogs sometimes do, as if to say, what are you talking about? And that gave me the idea, wait a minute, there's something here. Because Lily would have been my other. In fact, was my other for the vast majority of my life, being a dog. I grew up as a Muslim with a very unhealthy fear of dogs. Dogs were considered najis, which means in Arabic, toxic, dirty. And in this case, spiritually dirty, not just physically dirty. And I had to get over my irrational fear of dogs in order to bond with Lily. And when I did get over that fear, didn't take very long, I realized, oh my God, this is what all the fuss is about. This is why people have dogs. They're brilliant. They're healing. They're hilarious. How did I live without Lily until now? And that was part of the point I was making in the book, is that we all have fears of the other, but that we need to get over those fears in order to see what we really are missing. And by the way, these days, of course, we are, again, steeped in talk of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So yes, says the white person to him or herself, we must get over the, anti-Black racism that we have in this country. Well, I'm here to say that Republicans must get over their fear of Democrats. Democrats must get over their fear of Republicans. Many white people must get over their fear of other white people. It's not just one way, this fear. We all, including people of color, have all kinds of fears. And these days, white folks get the brunt of that accusation. But it's time to bust out again of us against them and recognize that if we're going to be trying to overcome fear by blaming a group of people for having it, that's not busting out of us against them. It's perpetuating us against them. And I felt as well that by bringing in Lily, who is a creature of an entirely different species, I'd be able to make that point, at least to some degree, without pointing fingers at fellow human beings. So that's the reason for Lily. Why now? As somebody to whom many labels are ascribed, Muslim, woman, queer, person of color, migrant, I've been treated like a poster child of multiculturalism most of my life. And so I've been in the unique position of really picking up on how diversity is being practiced. And over the last decade or so, I've come to really appreciate that diversity is being practiced as labeling. And that labeling, in fact, in its effect, is anti-diversity. Because it minimizes people. It diminishes us. It reduces us to just a thin sliver of who anybody is and vaporizes all the rest that make us, as I point out in the book, plurals. And the straight white guy is a plural as much as the queer Muslim chick is a plural, and everybody in between, because each one of us has a backstory that is unique from every other person's backstory. Similar experiences, sure, but how you interpret those experiences could very well differ from somebody who belongs to your community or to your group, hence plural. And in 2015, I decided it's time to write about this. I did not know that in 2020, 2021, the issue would become so salient. The book came out in 2019. So, again, the timing was right, but for reasons I couldn't have anticipated. I just spoke what I consider to be a truth that very few people are able to speak because of the fear they have for going there. And you know me by now. I don't fear going there, but I also try to use whatever courage I have in a constructive way. So it was a matter of balancing my responsibility with my fearlessness. And that brings us to where we are today.
Great. And just to divert from our list of questions just a little bit, it sounds like, this book ended up being more than sort of a message that you wanted to effectively convey to people, but surprisingly has actually become a tool for you. I mean, not only a tool for readers who want to put it, but it sounds like it's become a tool in the progress of the work that you're now engaged in.
That's right. It really has become a starting point for all kinds of people who, again, want to transcend once and for all the us against them paradigm, but don't know how, don't even know where to begin. And whether it's educators or whether it is entrepreneurs, executives, employees, pastors, parents, people in their various identities are coming to realize that there has to be a better way and are now looking for the alternative. So I'm pleased to say that, I'm not the only alternative out there. The moral courage method is not the only alternative that exists, but it is one that seems to be capturing a set of values that I think also, by the way, this pandemic has made us realize we need to, get back to, which is the value of curiosity and caring over compulsion and compliance.
Great. Okay, now the big question that I've been sort of chomping at the bit, but actually I've been listening very intently, so not too hard. But this is not my question. I just happened to look over the list that I was asked to sort of present, and it's the first one I really bolded and say I got to ask that question. And I'm going to read it verbatim. But first, I want to preface it because this morning I got a call from a good friend of mine who lives in Tennessee. He used to work for me. He was a conservative when I met him, and I turned him into a liberal, which I was very proud of. And now he and I both commiserate over what become of our liberal community. So we talk pretty frequently, about once or twice a week. And he called to let me know that in Tennessee, they had just, the governor had just signed a law, you may have heard about this, banning the teaching of critical race theory. So I've gone online to look up this story and find out what exactly is going on. And of course, the news media is all saying this is a ban on critical race theory and quote, progressives who are upset about being unable to teach this and consider it a racist bill. So I went to the trouble of actually finding the language of the bill to figure out what it says. And I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's too long. I'm just going to read like maybe the first 5 bullet points out of about 11. And I would say all 11 sort of have the same tone, but this is what it in part says. This amendment also prohibits any LEA, I'm assuming that's education structure of some sort, or public charter school from including or promoting the following concepts as part of a course of instruction or in a curriculum of instructional program, or allowing teachers or employees of the LEA or public charter school to use supplemental structural materials that include or promote the following concepts. So these following concepts are prohibited. One race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. 2, An individual by virtue of the individual's race or sex is inherently privileged, racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or subconsciously. 3, an individual should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment because of the individual's race or sex. 4, an individual's moral character is determined by the individual's race or sex. 5, an individual by virtue of the individual's race or sex bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. And on it goes, okay? So it doesn't necessarily say anything about critical race theory, but these are the bans. Now, here's the question that is surmised in our list that was generated from some of our attendees and participants. Critical race theory has become a Republican boogeyman. Yet many of us liberal Unitarian Universalists, having witnessed their intolerance of critique, have genuine concerns with aspects of CRT ideology embraced by leaders in our religious association. How can we respond when those of us with such concerns are lumped in with the alt-right, as one UU minister did in a video currently posted? Lumped us in with the alt.
Yeah.
Big question, but
Yeah, it is. It is. First of all, I totally appreciate the questioner's distinction between some aspects of critical race theory being problematic, being compulsory, and other aspects not being problematic and not being authoritarian. And I appreciate that distinction because, again, most people don't make that distinction. You're either for CRT or you're against it. And that is part of the world in which we're living now, is that if you are not overtly for something, as that UU minister who lumped, dissidents like you and me in with the alt-right did, if you're not immediately and overtly for something in all its manifestations, then you must be against it. And I will therefore affiliate you with those caricatures who are most vocal about it. And here I think you can do something. Subversive. Think of an analogy. The one that comes to my mind right away is Islam. There are some aspects of the way it's practiced that I take real issue with. Does that mean I am anti-Islam? Of course not. It means that I would like to help fix what has gone wrong in order to live up to the values that it professes. Similarly, if the way CRT is being practiced undermines the very values that it states it's about, then you are in fact wanting to make CRT a belief that has integrity by saying that I question some of its aspects, but I question it not because I'm against it, but because I believe the way it can be taught can be more humane and can live up to the values that it's supposed to be about. Do you see how, by invoking the example of Islam, I use an idea that UU minister would be able to relate to? So here's the point. Don't play on the terms of the people who want to divide you and divide us. The moment you play on their terms, you're on the defensive. And everything you say will be seen through that lens. You're either with us or you're against us. Instead, reframe it. And speaking of you're either with us or against us, we all remember, we're all old enough to remember, when President George W. Bush said you're either with us or you're with the terrorists. Now, what would the UU minister in question here say about that? I think you said he. Would he, would he say that that made sense? Would he say that Bush spoke truth?
No.
No, precisely. Similarly, his, you're with us or against us, you're with us or against us approach is another Bushism. And I think these are the analogies that we need to keep in mind. Because what we're trying to show is that you're doing, in approaching justice as if it is just us, you're actually not solving the problem, Mr. Minister. You're actually perpetuating the problem. But to say that on its own won't get you anywhere. Use an analogy that he can relate to, and then hold up the mirror to say, how does your either with us or against us approach, how is that any different from what President Bush did in Congress? How is that any different from those Christian dissidents who oppose right-wing Christian evangelicalism? Are they sellouts to Christianity? Keep using the analogies. And by the way, don't expect the minister or anybody else's ego to allow them to admit in that moment, my gosh, you're right. Don't worry about winning. In fact, the moment you turn something into a debate, listening goes out the window, because in a debate, there can only be one winner. So stay away from recreating in your own responses an us against them narrative. Ask open-ended questions. And keep it discursive. Make it a discussion, not a contest. So that when that minister walks away, he will not feel humiliated. He will not feel like you've slam dunked him. And because he will not feel that way, since you did not turn it into a debate, he'll be more motivated to think about what you said, rather than dig in his heels and become defensive for the sake of saving face.
Great, thank you so much. That's really sound advice. Using analogies, and don't worry about winning the argument.
Correct.
Keep the conversation open. Really.
Todd, I can honestly tell you, I wish I had that wisdom when 20 years ago I began, traveling the world advocating for reform in my faith of Islam. As I said in the book, it was only when I changed myself that the responses I got changed. And it's by following this advice that today I can report to you that the emails and posts that I get from young Muslims around the world report how they've been able to ask tough questions and have once taboo discussions with their own elders because they've approached it with the moral courage method. How I wish I had had my own advice 2 decades ago.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So for those who are projecting out 2 decades ahead, start now, so you don't regret it and not having it sooner. So about this sort of Tennessee bill, critical race, or it's being called anti-critical race theory. I think there's going to be a tendency in the us versus them mindset when people, and I know there's more of these bills coming, when I read it, I actually agreed with those those bans, if you will.
Mhm.
But or maybe ban's too strong a word, but nevertheless, I agreed with those goals. But I also foresee, because of this us versus them mentality, that these sort of bills are going to drive progressive thinkers toward critical race theory.
Precisely. That's exactly right. You mentioned just moments ago a ban. Oh, but wait, I might not necessarily be in favor of a ban, but I am in favor of the goal. See, again, that's a brilliant distinction. A ban is about the how. A goal is about the what. And the how matters to the what. That is, if we simply seek to ban something that can be taught in a more humane way, then we become hypocrites. Because here you are, a proponent of pluralism and multiplicity of voice and diversity of viewpoint. Well, wait a minute. Critical race theory, like it or not, is a viewpoint. How then, I ask myself, can I be against something that isn't immediately or overtly hateful? No, it has to be part of the diversity of viewpoints, but a diversity of viewpoints. It can't be the only ideology or theory that is taught to young people. It's got to be one among many. At the very least, one among a few. So let, the 1619 Project be taught, as long as the US Constitution and American Revolution and the scientific enlightenment that informed, those things, let that be taught too. And let young people decide for themselves what makes sense in their world. And that's also part, I think, of what is so lamentable about the way this debate, because let's face it, it is a debate, which is why people dig in their heels. It's so lamentable that teachers who are afraid to dissent with the most vocal, of their colleagues, are in a position now of imposing blinkers and blinders on a new generation. Their own blinkers and blinders. That is not education. That is not unleashing the mind. That is shackling the mind. And so again, whenever I am talking to any audience that is not nearly as sympathetic as this one is, I always ask myself, what are their values? What do they passionately care about? And let me then frame what I'm trying to get across in a way that speaks to those values. So that's another, part of the moral courage method. This is why, by the way, if I were engaging with a skeptical or hostile audience right now, I wouldn't be doing all this talking. I'd be asking you all a whole bunch of questions. And they wouldn't be gotcha questions. They would be non-judgmental questions, questions born of curiosity. Like, how did you come to that position? Tell me a bit about your backstory. So you share your backstory with me. And I would listen to understand, not to win. And I would show that I'm listening to understand by asking more questions. And I would remember what Irshad Manji taught me, which I'm going to right now, which is that asking people, tell me more, is so much more effective to get them to open up than to say, but why? But why can be accusatory. It can be judgmental, even if you don't mean it that way. But why suggests I'm pushing back. tell me more suggests I'm holding back, I'm stepping back. The floor is still yours. And when we do that, we lower the emotional defenses of the other, which then helps them dissolve and diminish the negative noise that the ego, brings up in their heads. They no longer need to feel like you're going to play gotcha with them. They no longer need to feel like you're out to win. They can now trust you. And as a result, the defenses come down. And the beauty is, they're much more likely to hear where you're coming from because you gave them that same courtesy first. There is a bodily response that is very much led by our brain wiring that allows people to now be curious about why you believe what you believe, because you've gone first in the listening department.
Wonderful, thank you. I think one of the frustrations we're feeling in our religion right now is it's difficult for us to even begin those sort of conversations because we've been locked out of a steel door. So this leads to another question here that I think expresses this concern better than I can. Our purportedly democratic association no longer has a letters to the editor section in our national magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And this was because they were getting a lot of questions and maybe even some negative comments. And there is no way for UUs to easily communicate with other UU congregations outside of official channels. A fearful silence reigns as people are afraid of being called out and labeled. How can we have morally courageous conversations in such circumstances?
So, the alternative to either or is both and. And that's what I'm going to speak to just now. I may need more clarification about the official channels by which UU congregations can speak with one another, but here we are right now on a video conference, speaking with one another without officialdom, giving us the permission to do so, right? My question to all of you is, do you want to wait and wait and wait for the so-called leadership to get it? Or in the spirit of UUs, do you want to start your own thing? And by own thing, I don't necessarily mean a breakaway denomination, although that might come later on. I mean your own communication channels. Why not get, if we have this many people on this Zoom call tonight, and it is a very impressive turnout, you can rest assured there are countless more members of your faith who are desperate to have these conversations and figure out what can we do together. That's what I mean by both and. Don't feel yourself locked into a particular institutional framework just because that's what exists right now. Okay, that's what exists right now. Guess what? You don't have to comply with that framework. You can create your own. What would that be? Well, you know the culture of your faith community infinitely better than I do. What could it be? Maybe you don't know right now what it could be. Fine. Bring even more people who are as, at the very least, ambivalent, if not frustrated with the leadership's unwillingness to listen. Bring all of those people in and ask one another, what could it be? What could we start? that doesn't need the permission of the leadership, so that we can continue to communicate and we can figure out for ourselves where to from here.
Great.
Tell me something. To me, that notion of not waiting for leadership to get it seems so obvious. Tell me what I'm missing. Tell me what I don't understand about why that's way harder than I've made it seem.
Yeah, I think it's a twofold answer. One is we're still waking up to this, and we're still in shock of what's happening. And so this book study that has included folks from around the country is really the largest endeavor I know of so far, where we've begun to recognize, we started asking the question, okay, we're not getting support from our association. How are we going to support each other? And there's some really practical things like, when one of our ministers leaves, where are we going to get a minister that has not been indoctrinated in the new mindset? Because unfortunately, that's what's happening. So at this, and the other part of this question is that, we have had a structure for years that had districts around the country, and we had leaders that were elected from those districts, and they were sent to Boston, and we had a voice, and churches knew what was going on. And in the past couple of decades, that eroded into just 5 regions and no district representation, no local representation, and we don't know what's going on. So decisions are being made really outside of a democratic process that is rapidly transforming our religion into something that it isn't. So we're almost left with the choice that we have to leave to move forward, and that means giving up a lot.
You mean leave the community?
Leave Unitarian Universalism, or start an alternate denomination. As you said, you may not have to do that. We're leaving our institution. We're leaving our bankroll. There's millions of dollars at stake, and so it's not. I'm not to say that we're resistant to that, but we've just not gotten to that point yet where we want to leave our faith.
So can I add here? I do not believe for a second that you need to leave Unitarian Universalism. Oh my gosh. I don't need to leave Islam to advocate for an interpretation that lives up to, the title religion of peace. In fact, if I left it, I would be ceding that territory to people whom, in my view, are corrupting it.
Mm-hmm.
So I refuse to leave, number one. But number two, I don't have to. And in the same spirit, I have never thought, Todd and everybody, that you would need to leave Unitarian Universalism. Quite the opposite. I'm saying, let this be, after much consultation with like-minded folks, figure out how to create and carve out a pluralistic space within Unitarian Universalism, and allow the leadership really to take, the faith community into the direction that they want to. You don't need to stop them. You just need to be an alternative. And let people within the faith community right across the country, right across the world know that this is a space where they really can live out the values of what they thought they were buying into. And you see, the great statement that you're making in doing this is, again, you're not going to play on the other's terms. They get to have their belief, you get to have yours, and let the most humane and welcoming and inclusive belief win. I know that I just finished saying it's not about win-lose. What I'm saying is you don't have to treat it as win-lose. If you were treating it as win-lose, then you'd be fighting the leadership and fighting and fighting and hitting your head against that metaphorical brick wall and getting frustrated and thinking to yourself, that's it, I'm out. Don't let them push you out. Just create an alternate space. Both and.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. That's meaningful. I noticed when we were doing our individual groups, our small groups during the study, that a lot of the conversations went to what's going on in our religion. I think a lot of us are here because we have those concerns, and we're wanting to find a way to respond, and a way to speak, and a way to make some positive progress. So this has been very helpful, but I do want to move on to a question about what you're up to, because you've already mentioned a new curriculum for a national nonprofit, Let Grow Lunches Moral Courage ED. It's the no shaming alternative to mainstream anti-racism programs. I want to give you an opportunity to say more about that, because we are involved in a much bigger picture than just what's going on.
Right, certainly. So I'll be basic about this, because what I really want to focus on in saying what I'm about to say is what moral courage can do for you all. So 2 weeks ago, my team and I launched something called Moral Courage Ed. And this is an initiative for K-12 schools that empowers students to hear, not fear, different points of view. Exactly what we're talking about, pluralism. And ours is more than a curriculum. A curriculum suggests to me, here's a bunch of readings, here are a bunch of lesson plans, go do this. No. We're really taking educators on a journey to learn about themselves, to learn about how multifaceted they are, to learn about how they can apply the moral courage method to their own lives, and in that way discover for themselves the power of pluralism, and through the pedagogy, the how that we are teaching, then bring it to their students. So again, we're really thinking of what is it that teachers would want from professional development. They want to grow, and they want people to realize that for all of the pressures they're under, they're also human beings, and they need support and assistance in all aspects of their lives. So we're treating educators as human beings rather than strictly as educators. And so we've created a series of offerings that allow educators, in some cases, to smuggle in moral courage, smuggle that into their schools as part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative that the school already has. We've got the kind of book study that you've already done. We've also got, as of next week, an online course called Diversity Without Division, Introducing Educators to the Moral Courage Method. And I want to say a little bit about that in just a moment, because I'm going to be bringing it back to all of you. But here's the thing, the beauty of this journey that we're taking educators on. When you complete the course, you become eligible for advanced training to become a certified moral courage mentor. And certified by whom? By no less an institution than Oxford University. I teach at Oxford University's Initiative for Global Ethics and Human Rights. And I teach moral courage to all kinds of people all around the world through that initiative. And so given that relationship, I was able to get Oxford University on board to issue a certification to any educator who not just completes this course, but who also then agrees to take a deeper dive into applying the moral courage method to the real and messy world. And when they get that certification from Oxford, they then not only become certified to teach moral courage within their own school, that part is obvious, but they're also certified to teach it outside of the school, to community groups, to religious congregations, to sports clubs. Wherever human beings gather, there will be conflict and tension. And educators who are certified to be moral courage mentors can then be brought in by any one of these, community or civic organizations, and can actually charge money, can make a little bit of pocket money on the side, teaching the moral courage method of busting out of us against them and moving towards both and. So this brings me back to all of you. I know when Rick and I first talked about the book study, I also told him, and I think, Todd, you may have been involved in that first conversation too, that at some point, I said this many months ago, at some point, we're going to be coming out with this course. And it turns out that for educators, we will be releasing it next week. Wow. I'm going to be adapting this course to people outside of the education field who also want to become certified and who therefore will be in a position to go and teach others in the community how to resolve differences and how to revive pluralism, in this country. And again, to be able to charge money to do that. I know that that's not what anybody here is in it for, but let's be honest, be brutally honest, it helps. And I've learned that the hard way because, as I was 10 years ago, constantly asked by young Muslims, Irshad, you need to tell us how to get involved. How can we get involved? And I would say, here's how to get involved. And then the demands of life took over and young people had to make a living, and the efforts to keep them involved, flamed out. And I learned the hard way. It's because life is hard. Everybody has problems. And if you can't put food on the table, then your best intentions to be active in something you believe in will take a backseat to making a little bit of money. And so I'm saying that here's an opportunity to do both. To become a moral courage mentor to people in your community, whatever community that may be. Could be the spiritual community, but it could be outside the spiritual community too. Maybe you sit on the board of a secular organization and, we're having problems figuring out how to solve or resolve X. Great, guess what? The moral courage method is not just about diversity and inclusion. It applies to everything. So ultimately, the goal here over the next 20 years is to create a global community of moral courage mentors who will in turn continue to teach beyond their immediate world these skills. And the Moral Courage Project will continue to supply all of our mentors with cutting edge research and with opportunities to network with one another so that you're not alone, that in addition to your faith community, you're part of a global community of moral courage mentors. And I can very well see the opportunity to come together online and in person once a year, maybe more than that, for the moral courage mentors to tell me what's working and what's not, where they're getting stuck, what notes they've swapped with each other that have gotten them unstuck. And the beauty, I think, of doing this is that none of this is intended to become a dogma. As I say, the world has enough dogma. My hope is that by emphasizing the need for questions and for questions that challenge, that will be, if anything's going to be a dogma, it will be that. And it's very hard for a habit of asking challenging questions to ourselves and to one another to become a dogma, because by its very nature, it's undogmatic. As long as we approach the asking of questions and therefore approach the building of relationships through the lens of grace, through a non-dogmatic prism. And all of this will be refined in the coming years as this network of moral courage mentors grows. And as I learn what more the network needs in order to have the kind of impact that we need to have if some of the existential problems that we're facing as a planet are going to be resolved sustainably, by which I mean in an enduring way, not in a way that is imposed, only to have the other side now, fight back when their people are in power, but in a way that gets buy-in from as many sides as possible, precisely because we've got to move forward. Does this make sense?
It does. It's very inspiring for sure. And I'm imagining there's folks who are listening that may want to, that are educators and some who aren't educators that may want to take advantage of this at some point. What's your preferred way for people to stay in touch with you on how this is progressing?
So here's the best way for now. Sign up to my newsletter, the URL of which I'm putting in the chat right now. And I will regularly communicate with my newsletter subscribers, it's free, how everything is unfolding, what next steps are, and that if y'all are interested, here's how to let us know. So I think that the newsletter probably is the very best way to tap into what next for now. And by the way, the next newsletter is going out next week. So sign up sooner than later if you care to learn more. One other thing, Moral Courage Ed, the K-12 initiative, has launched its own website, and I've just put the website address there. And one of the pages of the website is all about free resources. And on the resources page are so many great pieces of content that you can read, you can watch, or you can listen to. And one of those pieces of content I especially want to draw your attention to is the first item on the resources page. The item is called, "What is the Moral Courage Pedagogy?" I encourage all of you to click that and download the PDF, because what this is a personal meditation by me on how I came to understand that moral courage means not just speak truth to power, meaning the powers out there, but also to speak truth to the power of our own egos. And when you read this, I've written it in a way that really is a journey, because it's my journey. So you'll be taken along on a journey too. This is not an academic treatise. When you read this, you will have the kind of context for really appreciating why the moral courage method is as powerful as it is. And I think this is the kind of context that will keep you excited, not just get you excited.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to ask, I think since it's about 7:15, I want to ask one more question, and then I want to leave some time for you to give some closing remarks. And I'm sure there's some things you want to say that we haven't thought of. But I just happened to finish reading John McWhorter's new book, 9 Nasty Words, this morning, which I highly recommend. And I would say if you are going to read it, even if you're not a fan of Audible, let John McWhorter read it to you, because if you don't have a sensitive ear, it is amazing to hear him read, and just a delight to hear him talk about 9 nasty words. He talks about the sort of development of nasty words, forbidden words, taboo words, as really beginning as religious taboos, hell and damn, which there's no shock in me even repeating them tonight because we've moved away from those, moving into a phase of sort of bodily taboo, particularly around sexual connotations, and some of those are still would make me blush to say, but they're not as bad as they were in the past. But then they move into slurs, and that's where we're at today. We're at where slurs are really problematic for us. The N word, of course, being the major one, the C word being another that just very, very hard to justify saying. So I want to, sort of give a shout out to the CRT folks, right? That who often call people out for saying the wrong things. Sometimes we really do say things that are the wrong things. My question is for the moral courage folks, for the moral courage mentors or mentees or those wishing to become so. How should we respond to those we see as violating some sort of primal social value that we have? Is it right to cancel and shun, or is there a way to deal with somebody who uses the N word in a workplace, for example, without saying you're fired, with zero tolerance? Or is zero tolerance the right way? I'm not saying it's not, but you understand the question I'm asking, I'm sure.
I do, and precisely because it's situational, there is no bullet point answer to that. I think the compass that I go by is what is at one and the same time the most humane and the most effective way I can approach this. The two are constantly in my mind: most humane and most effective. Why be humane? Because if you're not, you're setting the example of a hypocrite. You're saying to the person using the slur that for the sake of treating other people decently, don't do that. But if I'm going to treat that person badly as I try to explain why they should not be saying what they said, then my own example, makes me drains my credibility. I am not role modeling what I am teaching. So that's why humane is very important. And effective goes hand in hand with humane, right? If we're calling out, berating, insulting, mocking, shaming, and ultimately humiliating the person whom we're trying to influence, how do we expect them to actually hear? How do we expect their hearts to change? Humiliation is, as I've explained in Don't Label Me, and I have the academic research to back it up in my footnotes, humiliation is the most violent emotion that people can feel. It sinks its claws deeper into our psyche than even happiness does. You cannot change the world for the better by calling out. You may have a temporary victory, but it will only be temporary. And watch out, because when it's convenient for the person who is humiliated, you're going to get it. So call in. Doesn't mean you shut up. It means you call in rather than call out. It means you ask that person. I noticed that you use that word. Tell me why it's okay to use that. I genuinely want to know from your point of view what motivated you to say that. And I'm listening. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to understand. Really begin a conversation with that person, because context matters too, as I said in that firing line interview, right? If you heard a person say the N-word, but you didn't hear the person before him or her say, listen, bleep, I dare you to say that word. Say it. Go ahead, say it. And that person has been baited into saying it. If you didn't hear that first part, doesn't mean that it's okay for that person to have said it, but you need context. So ask, don't demand. Ask because it's humane, and ask because it's much more effective than beating someone over the head.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And again, we're so grateful for all the time and wisdom that you've shared with us, both through your life, your writings, and giving us generously of your time tonight. Thank you so much for being here. I do want to respect that time and respect the time of those who are here with us. So I'm going to open up these last few minutes for you to just an open question for you to answer, whatever question comes to your mind. And then after you're done, I'm going to actually ask my brother, Richard Davis, to take over again in case he has any closing words or wants to wrap things up by saying goodbye, and thank you to folks as well. But again, thanks everybody for what's been an incredible experience. It's been extraordinary to be with you these past few weeks. And Irshad Manji, I'm going to turn it over to you now to grace us with your own chosen words of wisdom.
Well, first and foremost, my apologies to all of those who did not see the two web links earlier. I only later realized that I was sending them to a particular person rather than to everyone. But I did send them now to everyone. Do we all see them? Thumbs up? Perfect, thank you. The only thing I want to say, which I know I have said repeatedly tonight, but both because of the way we are wired and because of the culture in which we exist at this moment, cannot be said enough, is please remind yourself that either or restricts the possibilities of anything. So when you read a headline that tells you something that makes you sad and that vaults you into despair, remember, that is not all that is happening. There's a whole lot of other stuff that's happening that headline doesn't tell you about. But you have to remind yourself that just because I'm reading this doesn't mean that's all there is to my world right now. There's other stuff too, good stuff, positive stuff. We need to tame the fearful, fretting ego into realizing that life is both and, not either or. And it's when we remind ourselves of this as a habit, and I emphasize habit, that it finally and literally becomes a no-brainer. And that takes practice. If you only do it once in a while, oh yeah, right. Remember what Irshad said, both and. Just because I'm reading this story and it's telling me something is happening doesn't mean that other good stuff is not happening. If you only remind yourself of that once every while, your ego will not be trained and it will resist your efforts to bust out of this prison that the either or mentality forces us into. Make it a habit every single day. I've had to do that, folks. It's how. Why do you guys always make me emotional? You always make me emotional. It's how I keep my faith in humanity. Because I will tell you, I could so easily pack it in. I hear stupidity. I hear passivity. I hear evil from people who insist that they are making the world better. And I could say to myself, that's it. I don't need this BS. Human beings are not worth my time. I'm going to pack it in and I'm going to move to a goat farm and I'm going to give the rest of my life to our furry, four-legged, feathered, and scaled friends. And don't think for a moment I haven't fantasized about it. But I remind myself, just because I'm engaging with this person does not mean everybody is like that. And that's when I take my breath, I slow the blood rush in my body, and I say, nothing changes, including the way animals are treated, unless I do my part in human beings changing themselves. So you see, even my North Star, even the fantasy that I have, relies on us human beings changing ourselves. And I can't expect other human beings to change themselves if I'm not willing to change myself. I can't expect anybody else to bust out of us against them if I don't consistently bust out of that too. And we're wired to feel threat, which is why it takes intention. But I'll tell you, because I've trained myself to do this, it happens like this now. Sure, I get annoyed. Sure, I get frustrated. Sure, I get angry. Sure, you see it in me, right? Things just don't bounce off of me like that. You know, I'm not made of Teflon. I'm human too. And I feel things deeply. And it hurts. But what other choice do we have if we want change than to role model that change? And to role model that change, you have to govern yourself before you can expect others to govern themselves, or before we can expect government to reflect our values. So please, do not throw in the towel. There's no need to. Remember that there is always a choice outside of what the ego is telling us it has to be. And then resolve to make that choice over and over again. And it'll be less hard with each passing opportunity. That's all I have to say.
Irshad Manji, thank you so much for your beautiful soul, your wisdom, your time. You are such a gift to our world and to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. God bless you all.
Same to you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, is it over now? Or is it gonna
Yeah, I
keep
guess
going?
so. Oh,
Wow. Well, as soon as she started talking about more courage, I immediately got
I'm not sure it was really clear, but it looks like everyone signed off now. So I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. But I just wanted to, as a courtesy, but say that it's looking to me as the host that most of the reverends and Irshad have all signed off. So I'm going to end the meeting now. Sherry, I'm sorry they didn't ever notice your hand or get to your question. I do apologize for that. So take care, and we hope to see you. There will be a recording of this available soon. I was recording it. Thanks, everyone. Good night. Thanks for participating. Bye.